Tasi Tanasik Maria Gonzalez pushed her cleaning cart through the marble hallways of the Pemberton Tower, Manhattan's most exclusive residential building. At 4:30 a.m., the silence was broken only by the soft squeak of her cartwheels and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. She had been cleaning these halls for 3 years, invisible to most residents who paid more for their monthly maintenance fees than she earned in 6 months. The 38-year-old single mother had perfected the art of being unseen. She knew exactly when each resident left for work, when they returned, and which apartments would be empty. Floor 47 was always her last stop, the penthouse level where only 3 families lived in spaces larger than most people's entire neighborhoods. But this morning was different. As Maria approached apartment 47C, she heard something that made her freeze mid-step. It was soft at first, barely audible through the heavy oak door, but unmistakable, the sound of a child crying. Not the dramatic wailing of a tantrum, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of someone who had given up hope that anyone would come. Maria glanced at her watch. 4:45 a.m. She knew the Blackwood family's schedule by heart. Victoria Blackwood, the pharmaceutical heiress worth an estimated $340 million, always left for her morning workout at 5 a.m. sharp. Her husband, Richard, a prominent Manhattan lawyer, typically departed by 6:30 a.m. Their 7-year-old son, Thomas, should have been fast asleep. The crying continued, growing more desperate. Maria had a strict rule: never get involved. In her 3 years of cleaning for the ultra-wealthy, she had witnessed affairs, heard screaming matches that would make reality TV producers jealous, and seen enough family dysfunction to fill a psychology textbook. But she had always kept walking, always minded her own business. That's how people like her survived in places like this. But this was a child. She knocked softly on the door. Hello, is everything okay? The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by the sound of small feet running, then barely above a whisper, "Who's there?" "My name is Maria. I work here, cleaning the building. Are you hurt, sweetheart?" A long pause. Then, "My tummy hurts really bad and nobody's here." Maria's heart clenched. She tried the door handle, surprised to find it unlocked. The apartment that greeted her was a monument to wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, artwork that belonged in museums, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. But none of that mattered as she spotted Thomas Blackwood sitting on the Italian leather sofa, clutching his stomach, tears streaming down his pale face. He was still in his pajamas, expensive silk ones that probably cost more than Maria's weekly grocery budget, but he looked so small and vulnerable that all she saw was a scared little boy. "Hey there, Thomas," Maria said gently, setting her cleaning supplies aside. "I'm Maria. Can you tell me what's wrong?" Thomas looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. You know my name?" "Of course I do. I've been cleaning your home for a long time. I see your drawings on the refrigerator sometimes. You're quite the artist." A small smile flickered across his face before the pain returned. "My stomach really hurts. It started last night, but Mommy had to go to an emergency board meeting, and Daddy went with her to that dinner thing. Rosa was supposed to stay, but she got a phone call and had to leave for a family emergency. She said she'd be right back, but..." He looked toward the window where dawn was beginning to break. "That was yesterday." Maria felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. This wasn't about judgment. This was about a child in pain. "How long has your tummy been hurting, sweetheart?" "Since yesterday afternoon. It keeps getting worse." Thomas doubled over slightly. "I tried calling Mommy, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. Daddy's too." Maria knelt beside the couch, her maternal instincts overriding every professional boundary she'd ever set. "Can you show me where it hurts?" Thomas pointed to his lower right side. Maria's blood ran cold. Her own son, Miguel, had experienced similar symptoms 2 years ago. Appendicitis. They'd barely made it to the hospital in time. "Thomas, honey, I think we need to get you to a doctor right now. But I'm not supposed to leave with strangers. Mommy always says..." "You're absolutely right to be careful," Maria said, pulling out her phone. "But sweetie, I think you might be really sick, and we can't wait for your parents. I'm going to call 911, okay? They'll send paramedics who can help you feel better." As she dialed, Maria couldn't help but think about the cruel irony. Here was a child with access to the best healthcare money could buy, living in a home worth tens of millions of dollars, and he was alone and in pain while his parents attended social functions. Meanwhile, she had spent countless nights in emergency rooms with Miguel, knowing that every minute of treatment was money she didn't have, but never once leaving his side. The 911 dispatcher was efficient and professional. "Paramedics are en route. Stay on the line with me." While they waited, Maria sat beside Thomas. letting him lean against her as waves of pain washed over him. "You know," she said softly, "when my son Miguel was about your age, he had pain just like this. The doctors fixed him right up and now he's 13 and plays soccer every day after school." "You have a son?" Thomas asked, momentarily distracted from his pain. "I do. He's sleeping right now. It's still very early, but when he was 7, just like you, he loved to draw too. He drew pictures of superheroes saving the day." "I like drawing buildings," Thomas whispered. "Really tall ones that touch the clouds. Maybe someday you'll design buildings like that for real." The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, a response time that Maria knew was partly due to the building's prestigious address. As they examined Thomas, confirming her suspicions about possible appendicitis, she found herself in an impossible position. She was the only adult present, but she had no legal authority to make medical decisions for this child. "We need parental consent for treatment," the lead paramedic explained. "Have you been able to reach his parents?" Maria shook her head, frustration building. "I've tried calling, but their phones go straight to voicemail. In emergency situations involving minors, we can transport to the hospital, but we'll need to keep trying to reach the parents." As they prepared to move Thomas to the stretcher, he grabbed Maria's hand. "Please don't leave me alone again." The words hit her like a physical blow. In that moment, Maria made a decision that would change everything. "I'm coming with you, sweetheart. I won't leave you alone." She knew she was risking her job. She knew she was overstepping boundaries that people in her position weren't supposed to cross. She knew that when Victoria Blackwood discovered that the cleaning lady had taken her son to the hospital, there would be consequences. But as she looked down at Thomas's frightened face, none of that mattered. Some lines couldn't be uncrossed, and some moments demanded that you choose between what was safe and what was right. "Let's go get you feeling better," she said, squeezing his small hand as they headed toward the elevator that would take them both into an uncertain future. What happens when worlds collide and a moment of human compassion changes everything? Stay with us as this story unfolds. The fluorescent lights of Mount Sinai Hospital's emergency department cast harsh shadows across Maria's tired face as she sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, still wearing her cleaning uniform. It was 7:23 a.m., and she hadn't stopped trying to reach Thomas's parents for the past 2 hours. Her phone battery was dying. Her supervisor had called 3 times asking where she was, and she knew that her absence from work would mean losing a day's pay she desperately needed. But none of that mattered as much as the little boy lying in the hospital bed behind the curtain, finally sleeping peacefully after the doctors had administered pain medication and confirmed what Maria had suspected: acute appendicitis requiring immediate surgery. "Mrs. Gonzalez?" Dr. Sarah Chen approached with a clipboard and a concerned expression. "We still haven't been able to reach Thomas's parents. The numbers you provided aren't answering and we need surgical consent. How exactly are you related to the patient?" Maria felt heat rise to her cheeks. She had stretched the truth when they'd arrived, implying she was a family friend rather than revealing she was just the building's cleaning staff. I take care of him sometimes," she said, which wasn't entirely a lie. She had been taking care of him for the past 3 hours, more than his own parents had. Dr. Chen studied her carefully. "I understand your concern, but without parental consent, we can only provide emergency stabilization. For the surgery he needs, we have to keep trying to reach his legal guardians." "Doctor, with respect, this child was alone and in pain for hours. His parents left him with a nanny who disappeared during a family emergency, and they're not answering their phones. How long are we supposed to wait while he suffers?" The exhaustion and frustration in Maria's voice was unmistakable. Dr. Chen had seen enough cases to recognize genuine care when she saw it, regardless of the complicated circumstances. "Look," Dr. Chen said quietly, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "I've been practicing pediatric emergency medicine for 8 years. I've seen nannies, housekeepers, and teachers show more concern for children than their own parents, but legally, my hands are tied. Give me another hour to reach them, and if we can't, we'll have to involve Child Protective Services to get emergency consent." Maria nodded, understanding the position the doctor was in. She walked back to Thomas's bedside, where he was stirring awake. "Maria," he whispered, reaching for her hand. "You're still here." "Of course I'm still here, sweetheart. I promised I wouldn't leave you alone." "The doctor said I need an operation. Are my parents coming?" Maria felt her heart break a little more. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his parents, who could charter private jets on a whim, couldn't be bothered to answer their phones when their child was in the hospital? "The doctors are still trying to reach them," she said gently. "But you know what? You're going to be just fine." The doctors here are the best in the city. Thomas was quiet for a moment, then looked up at her with those serious brown eyes that seemed too old for his face. Maria, can I tell you something? Of course, honey. This isn't the first time they forgot about me. The words hung in the air like a confession that shouldn't have to be made by someone so young. Maria felt anger building in her chest, not the quick flash of irritation, but the deep, burning anger that comes when you witness injustice against someone who can't defend themselves. Last month, they forgot to pick me up from school, Thomas continued, his voice small. I waited until the janitor found me at 7 p.m. And sometimes Rosa has to leave because of her own family problems, and I just... Wait, Thomas, honey, I know they're important, he said quickly, as if defending them. Mommy always says she's saving lives with her medicine company, and Daddy helps important people with their problems. But sometimes I wonder if they remember that I exist when they can't see me. Maria had to bite her tongue to keep from saying what she really thought. Instead, she squeezed his hand. You know what I think? I think you're the most important thing in the world, and anyone who doesn't see that is missing out on knowing an amazing little boy. At 8:45 a.m., Maria's phone finally buzzed, but it wasn't Thomas's parents. It was her own son, Miguel. Mummy, where are you? You're supposed to drive me to school. Maria closed her eyes, the weight of her divided responsibilities crushing down on her. Miguel was 13 and could probably figure out the subway route to school, but she hated the idea of him navigating the city alone, especially when she was supposed to be there for him. Miguel, baby, I'm at the hospital with a sick child from work. Can you ask Mrs. Rodriguez next door if she can walk you to the subway station? Are you okay? Are you hurt? No, mi amor, I'm fine. But this little boy needed help, and his parents, well, they're not here. I couldn't leave him alone. There was a pause, and then Miguel said something that made Maria's eyes well up with tears. You're doing the right thing, Mummy. I can take care of myself today. At 13, her son was already more mature and understanding than adults worth hundreds of millions of dollars. At 9:15 a.m., just as Dr. Chen was preparing to call CPS, Maria heard a commotion in the hallway. Raised voices, the sound of expensive heels clicking rapidly against linoleum, and then the unmistakable sound of someone used to getting their way demanding answers. Where is my son? I am Victoria Blackwood, and I demand to see my son immediately. Maria felt her stomach drop. She had been dreading this moment, knowing that when Thomas's mother arrived, her own presence would need explaining. She was just the cleaning lady who had overstepped every boundary imaginable. Victoria Blackwood swept into the emergency bay like a force of nature. Perfectly styled blonde hair despite the early hour, a designer suit that probably cost more than Maria's monthly rent, and the kind of presence that made everyone in the room immediately aware of her arrival. Her eyes swept the room, taking in the scene. Her son in a hospital bed connected to monitors, and a woman in a cleaning uniform holding his hand. Thomas! Victoria rushed to the bedside, and for a moment Maria saw genuine panic and relief in her eyes. Whatever else might be true about Victoria Blackwood, seeing her child in a hospital bed had shaken her to her core. Mommy? Thomas's voice was groggy from the pain medication, but his face lit up. You came. Of course I came, baby. Mummy's here now. Victoria stroked his hair, and Maria could see her hands shaking slightly. What happened? How did you get here? Thomas looked toward Maria, and Victoria followed his gaze. For the first time, the two women made direct eye contact, the millionaire pharmaceutical heiress and the building's cleaning lady who had spent the night in a hospital with someone else's child. This is Maria, Thomas said softly. She saved me, Mummy. I was really sick and scared, and she stayed with me the whole time. She didn't leave me alone. Victoria's expression was unreadable as she processed this information. Maria braced herself for the inevitable confrontation, the accusations, the threats about overstepping boundaries and involving herself in family matters. But what came next would surprise everyone in that room, including Victoria herself. When two worlds collide in a hospital room, what happens when a mother realizes that a stranger cared for her child when she couldn't? The answer will change everything. The silence in the hospital room was deafening. Victoria Blackwood stood frozen, her manicured hand still stroking Thomas's hair, as the full weight of what had happened began to settle over her. Maria remained in her chair beside the bed, unsure whether she should leave now that Thomas's mother had arrived, but unwilling to abandon the little boy who had clung to her hand through the longest night of his young life. Dr. Chen chose that moment to enter with Thomas's surgical consent forms, breaking the tension. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Dr. Chen. We need to discuss your son's condition and get authorization for the appendectomy he needs. Appendectomy? Victoria's voice cracked slightly. How serious is this? When did the symptoms start? Dr. Chen glanced meaningfully at Maria before responding. According to the information we received, Thomas began experiencing severe abdominal pain yesterday afternoon. His condition deteriorated overnight, and he was brought in around 5 a.m. by... She paused, looking between the two women. Mrs. Gonzalez here. Victoria's eyes snapped back to Maria, and this time there was no missing the calculation happening behind them. Yesterday afternoon, but that's impossible. Rosa was supposed to be with him, and Richard and I were only going to be gone for... She stopped mid-sentence, her face paling as she did the math. Mommy, Thomas said softly, Rosa had to leave because her mama got really sick. She said she'd be right back, but she never came. I called you lots of times, but your phone kept going to the voicemail, lady. Victoria closed her eyes, and Maria could see the exact moment when the successful, powerful businesswoman realized that her child had been alone and in pain while she was networking at a charity gala that had lasted until 3 a.m. The surgery needs to happen within the next few hours, Dr. Chen continued professionally. It's routine, but appendicitis can become dangerous if we wait too long. Victoria nodded numbly, signing the forms with hands that shook slightly. As Dr. Chen left to prepare for surgery, the room fell silent again except for the steady beeping of Thomas's monitors. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you been here with him? Since about 4:45 this morning, Maria replied honestly. I was cleaning the hallway when I heard him crying. You've been here for 5 hours. It wasn't a question. Victoria looked at Maria's uniform, at her tired eyes, at the way Thomas's small hand remained wrapped around Maria's fingers. You stayed all night with my son. He was scared and in pain. No child should be alone when they're hurting. The simple statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. She sank into the chair on the other side of Thomas's bed, and for the first time since entering the room, she looked truly vulnerable. I need to ask you something, Victoria said, and Maria braced herself for the accusation she'd been expecting. When you found Thomas, when you realized what was happening, why didn't you just call building security? Why didn't you wait for us to come home? Maria considered her words carefully. Mrs. Blackwood, your son was in severe pain, and I suspected appendicitis. My own son had the same symptoms 2 years ago. Waiting wasn't an option. But you risked your job. You risked everything for a child who isn't even yours. With respect, ma'am, he's a child. That's all that mattered. Victoria stared at her for a long moment, and Maria could see something shifting in her expression. The defensive anger was giving way to something else. Shame, perhaps, or recognition. I tried calling you both, Maria continued, for hours. I left messages. I called the building's emergency contact numbers. I even had the hospital try to reach you through your offices. We were at the Morrison Foundation Gala, Victoria said quietly. It's one of the biggest pharmaceutical fundraising events of the year. I turned my phone off during the dinner presentations, and then we went to the after-party at the Astor's place and She trailed off, realizing how hollow the explanation sounded when measured against her son's emergency. Mommy, Thomas said sleepily. Maria told me about her son Miguel. He had the same thing I have, but he got better. She said he plays soccer now. Victoria looked at Maria with new interest. You have a son? Yes, he's 13. He was supposed to start school at 8 a.m. today, but I couldn't leave Thomas alone. Maria felt compelled to add, Miguel understood. He took the subway by himself so I could stay here. The implication hung heavy in the air. A 13-year-old had shown more maturity and independence than 2 wealthy adults who had abandoned their 7-year-old son for a social event. Mrs. Gonzalez, Victoria said slowly, I need to ask you something else, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Maria tensed, preparing for the worst. Has this happened before? Thomas being alone, I mean. Maria looked down at Thomas, who had drifted off to sleep again, his small face peaceful now that the pain medication was working. She thought about his confession earlier, about waiting at school until the janitor found him, about the casual way he'd mentioned that his parents sometimes forgot about him. Mrs. Blackwood, I think that's a conversation you should have with your son when he's feeling better. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion Maria had seen from her besides panic. Oh God, what kind of mother am I? The question seemed to escape without her permission, and immediately she looked embarrassed by the vulnerability she'd shown. You're a mother who loves her son, Maria said gently, but maybe one who's forgotten that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. Victoria looked at her sharply, but there was no anger in her expression, only surprise at the cleaning lady's directness. "My Miguel," Maria continued. "He knows I love him not because I tell him, but because when he needs me, I'm there. When he's scared, I hold his hand. When he's hungry, I make sure he eats, even if it means I don't. That's what love looks like in action." "You don't understand," Victoria said, but her protest lacked conviction. "I have responsibilities. The company employs thousands of people. The decisions I make affect—" "Mrs. Blackwood," Maria interrupted quietly, "I work 3 jobs to support my son. I clean your building at 4 a.m., I work at a diner until 3 p.m., and I clean offices at night. I understand responsibility. But Miguel will never wonder if he matters to me, because I show him every single day that he's my priority." Victoria was quiet for a long time, staring at her son's sleeping face. When she finally spoke, her voice was different, smaller, more uncertain. "I don't know how to be the kind of mother you are. I don't know how to put him first when everything else seems so urgent, so important." "Then maybe," Maria said softly, "it's time to learn." At that moment, Dr. Chen returned with the surgical team. "We're ready to take Thomas up to the OR now. The procedure should take about an hour." As they prepared to move Thomas to the surgical bed, he woke up and immediately reached for Maria's hand. "So you'll be here when I wake up, right?" Maria looked at Victoria, unsure if she was still welcome now that his mother had arrived. "Yes," Victoria said firmly, surprising them both. "Maria will be here. We both will." As they wheeled Thomas away, Victoria turned to Maria. "I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll consider it carefully." Maria waited, her heart pounding. "I want to offer you a job. Not cleaning, I mean a real position. I want you to help me learn how to be the mother Thomas deserves. I want you to teach me what you know about putting children first." The offer hung in the air between them, as unexpected as it was life-changing. If this story is touching you in some way, comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Every place has its own struggles, and sometimes it's incredible to see how we all connect through such human stories. Maria stared at Victoria Blackwood in complete shock. The offer seemed surreal. A woman worth hundreds of millions of dollars asking a cleaning lady to teach her how to be a mother. For a moment, Maria wondered if the stress and exhaustion of the past few hours had caused her to hallucinate. I don't understand," Maria said carefully. "What exactly are you asking me?" Victoria took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried a vulnerability that money couldn't buy. "Maria, in the span of one night, you showed my son more genuine care than I have in months. You recognized his pain. You acted decisively. You stayed with him when he was scared. And you put his needs above everything else in your life. Those are skills I apparently don't have, despite having every advantage imaginable." "Mrs. Blackwood, I'm not qualified to—" "Stop," Victoria interrupted gently. "Don't tell me you're not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. I want to hire you as Thomas's full-time caregiver, but more than that, I want you to help me rebuild my relationship with my son. I want you to teach me how to be present, how to prioritize, how to show love the way you do." Maria felt overwhelmed. The offer represented everything she had ever dreamed of: financial security, the ability to focus on one child instead of juggling multiple jobs, a chance to make a real difference. But it also felt impossible. "I have my own son to think about," Maria said. "Miguel needs me. I can't abandon him to take care of someone else's child." "I wouldn't ask you to," Victoria said quickly. "Miguel would be part of this arrangement, private school, college fund, whatever he needs. I want both of you to be part of our family's reconstruction." Before Maria could respond, Dr. Chen appeared with a smile. "Good news. The surgery went perfectly. Thomas is in recovery now, and you can see him in about 30 minutes. Relief flooded through both women, and Maria realized that somewhere in the past few hours, she had become emotionally invested in this little boy's well-being in a way that went far beyond professional duty. "Dr. Chen," Victoria said, "I need to ask you something. In your professional opinion, what would have happened if Maria hadn't brought Thomas in when she did?" Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "Mrs. Blackwood, your son's appendix was very close to rupturing. If Mrs. Gonzalez had waited even a few more hours, we could have been looking at peritonitis, sepsis, or worse. She quite literally may have saved his life." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She sank into a chair, the full weight of how close she had come to losing her son settling over her. "I need some air," Victoria whispered, walking toward the hospital corridor. Maria followed her, finding Victoria leaning against the wall, tears streaming down her face. I almost lost him, Victoria said. While I was schmoozing donors and networking for business deals, my son was alone and dying, and a woman I pay to clean my floors cared more about his well-being than I did. Mrs. Blackwood, Victoria, please, and you're right to hesitate about my offer. Why would you want to work for someone who clearly doesn't deserve the child she has? Maria was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. You know what I saw in that hospital room? I saw a mother who was terrified when she realized her child was hurt. I saw someone who immediately started questioning her choices. Most people, when confronted with their mistakes, get defensive or make excuses. You asked for help. That tells me everything I need to know about whether you can change. Victoria looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. So you'll consider it. I'll consider it. But if I do this, it has to be done right. This isn't about you hiring someone to fix your problems. This is about you learning to be present, really present. What would that look like? Maria thought about Miguel, about all the small moments that had built their relationship. It means no phones during dinner. It means knowing his teachers' names and his favorite subjects. It means reading him stories even when you're tired, helping with homework even when you have important calls to make. It means showing up to his school plays and soccer games, even if there's a board meeting that seems more urgent. I can do that, Victoria said quickly. Can you? Because it means saying no to things that seem important, to say yes to things that actually are important. It means choosing Thomas over a business deal, even when that deal could make you millions. Victoria was quiet for a long time. My father built this company from nothing. When I took over, I promised myself I'd make it even bigger, even more successful. I thought that was how I'd honor his legacy, how I'd provide for Thomas's future. And what kind of future are you providing? One where he has everything money can buy but no memories of his mother actually being there. The question was harsh but necessary, and Maria could see it hit its mark. You know what Miguel will remember about his childhood? Maria continued. He'll remember that when he was scared during thunderstorms, I held him until he fell asleep. He'll remember that I taught him to ride a bike in the park, that I helped him with his science projects, that when he broke his arm playing baseball, I was there in the emergency room holding his hand. Those memories didn't cost me anything except time, but they're worth everything to him. Victoria nodded slowly. I want Thomas to have those memories too. When they returned to Thomas's room, he was awake and looking much better. His face lit up when he saw both women enter together. Mummy, Maria, the doctor said I'm going to be okay. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Victoria said, taking his hand. And you know what? Maria is going to be spending a lot more time with us from now on. Thomas's eyes widened with excitement. Really? Like she's going to live with us? Victoria looked at Maria, who took a deep breath and nodded. If you'd like that, Thomas, I'd love to spend more time with you, and you'll get to meet my son Miguel too. I get a big brother. Thomas's excitement was infectious. Over the next 2 hours, as Thomas recovered and prepared to go home, Maria and Victoria worked out the details of an arrangement that would change all their lives. Maria would move into the Blackwood penthouse with Miguel. She would oversee Thomas's daily care while helping Victoria learn to be more present. Miguel would attend the same private school as Thomas, and both boys would have access to opportunities Maria had only dreamed of. But more importantly, Thomas would have what he needed most: adults who put his well-being first. 3 months later, Maria stood in the kitchen of the penthouse helping Thomas with his math homework, while Victoria sat beside them, having left work early to spend the evening with her son. Miguel was at the dining table, working on a science project with the kind of focus that came from knowing he was safe, supported and loved. Maria, Thomas said, looking up from his worksheet, remember when you found me crying and my tummy hurt? I remember, sweetheart. I'm glad it happened. Victoria looked up sharply. Thomas, why would you say that? Because if I hadn't gotten sick, Maria wouldn't have come to help me, and you wouldn't have learned how to be the kind of mommy who reads bedtime stories and helps with homework. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of gratitude. You're right, baby, sometimes the scariest moments lead to the most beautiful changes. As Maria watched Victoria help Thomas with his homework, asking patient questions and celebrating his small victories, she reflected on how dramatically all their lives had changed from one moment of choosing compassion over convenience. Sometimes the most important decisions we make happen in an instant, when we choose to act with love instead of walking away, when we choose to be present instead of being busy, when we choose to put another person's needs above our own comfort. And sometimes those split-second decisions don't just change one life, they transform entire families, creating ripple effects of love that extend far beyond what we could ever imagine. And now that you've reached the end, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story does too.